Welcome to 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast, where I speak to bands about what they get up to and the jobs they've worked between tours. And, well, a lot of them still do work. A lot of them have given up work and do the band full-time. Jason Lubrano from Iron Chic is kind of a mix of the two. And it was a pleasure to get to talk to him and ask him all these kinds of intruding questions. We've got some great episodes coming up, so hit that subscribe button. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers and supporting live music since 2011. You may know them from their collaboration beers brewed with the likes of Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, Mogwai, and a host of other amazing bands. And as a listener to 101 Part-Time Jobs, you can go onto their website and get 10% off all orders there. That's all the beers on their site. You can get 10% off. signaturebrew.co.uk using the code 101podcast. That's all capital letters at checkout, and enjoy yourself responsibly. Thanks for listening. I guess the first thing that strikes me about bands in America is just how far you're traveling between gigs.
Yeah.
I mean, here in England, you could play a show 2 hours away and come home for work the next day. But in America, some of your drives are what? 10 hours? When you started playing in Iron Chic, were you kind of aware of that risk that you were going to have to take?
Well, I mean, I've been playing in bands since, I was about 16, but I didn't really have the opportunity to tour until we started Iron Chic. So I was like a little bit older, I guess, than your average, DIY punk band. Like I was, my late 20s, early 30s or whatever. So, and I think that's one thing for younger people, it's usually a little bit easier to kind of, pop in and out of like a restaurant job or construction or whatever, you do that where you don't really care if you lose that job to go on a 2-week tour and you come back or whatever, you worry about it. People live with their parents or whatever, just not as much responsibility. So it was always a little bit rougher for me, but, we've always been fairly smart about touring. So, in the beginning, it was a lot of shorter trips and stuff like that. So it wasn't as big of an issue. It wasn't really until the last, 5-6 years or whatever that we were really touring, hardcore. And at that point, it was almost already starting to be kind of self-sustaining. So I kind of luckily sort of, not entirely, but, passed over that phase a little bit.
And I wonder if Phil Douglas, obviously your guitarist in Iron Chic, but guitarist of Latterman toured a lot, or they seem to have toured a lot from my knowledge. So he brought some experience with him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We, overall, the band in general got like a nice little, head start as far as that kind of stuff goes. And also even, between Phil and Mike, just having a lot of contacts and, stuff like that.
Mike Bruno.
Yeah. Dumps, as we call him. Just having a lot of, people in his pocket from, booking shows and doing the label and stuff. All that made it a little bit easier for us to tour kind of right out of the gate.
I'm in my late 20s now. I'm 29. And I think if I started a band now, I would just want to be organized. I think when you're younger, it's a lot easier to just, forget about everything else and just do this one thing and be kind of immature about it.
Well, for me, it was like I said, because I hadn't really done much of it, I was, particularly gung-ho to do as much as we could and, and stuff like that. And, it's almost, it's hard even thinking back, remembering exactly how it all went down. But we were also lucky, one of our first tours was down to Fest. So it was we had a pretty much guaranteed good show. Some of the shows are kind of weird because it was like that Fest tour where it's, tons and tons of bands all, converging in the same spot at once. So.
And what year was that?
I'm going to say it was maybe 2010, 2009, something like that.
I think that's when we met, actually.
Yeah, I believe so.
I remember I was fighting off jet lag and we were in this house and you guys rolled through.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, wow, We love that band. And I guess thinking of that time, there must have not been too much pressure. That seemed like a pretty fun tour down to a fun festival.
Yeah, like the shows might not have paid as well or whatever, but there was a lot of people, and like, as far as like feeling encouraged to continue doing it, it definitely helped in that respect.
Had you started doing the illustration work that you do now? Were you doing it around that time?
Not really, like a little bit. Mostly, when I was starting out doing that stuff, it was mostly just out of a function of doing it for my own bands. I believe at that time, I worked at a print shop for about 8 years, and I'm not sure if I had been laid off already at that point. I was either working there or I was working at a pizzeria. It was one of the two, because that was what I did next. I think I may have been at the pizzeria at that time, because I think that made it a little bit easier for me to, to be able to do things on a whim like that, because it wasn't as much of a full-time, job as the print shop job that I had before that. The pizzeria was all right. It was my friend's uncle owned it, so it was a little bit looser of a deal than your average pizza delivery job. I probably made a couple bucks more than the other kids there did, and didn't really have anybody riding my ass or anything like that. And it was all right, I mean, it was as fun as like delivering pizza can be or whatever, I guess. Nothing too crazy. I always liked driving jobs. Like when I started at the print shop job before that, it was doing deliveries. So, I just being in the car and driving around was always like kind of a, fairly chill experience as far as working goes.
I'm so content when I'm driving. I crack on the Tom Petty best of, and just enjoy it.
Yeah. I was obsessed with talk radio for a while when I was driving a lot.
Is that sports talk radio?
More, I don't know, more like shock jock kind of stuff I probably honestly wouldn't listen to now, or would maybe even tell myself not to listen to that if I could. But there was like one talk radio show that just had a lot of like Howard Stern kind of type shows on it or whatever.
Right, he's a real thing, Howard Stern. We don't really have an equivalent.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about that.
His thing is just shock value, isn't it? I mean, I've been pretty shocked watching and listening to some of his programs.
Yeah, he's actually, I think, not that I've listened to him now, but he's like mellowed out a lot, I believe. He's pretty anti-Trump at this point, which is cool.
Around that time, was there this kind of pressure on you to, I mean, did you put pressure on yourself to like find a career, I suppose, whilst juggling what I can only presume is, something that came from a place of love? Playing in Iron Chic was pure enjoyment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never really expected to be able to make any kind of a living doing music. So it always felt like, a privilege or something that I would lose money on or whatever. And, at the time it was worth it for me to do that. And we were lucky enough to, be able to kind of, start putting our energies into it relatively quickly. And even though, like the first few tours were pretty spaced apart, like I think we maybe only went out, once or twice the first, couple of years that we had started doing it. So it was sort of more like a vacation, if anything.
Right. And did that change over years to come, it being a vacation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for us, yeah. We were lucky enough to, once we started doing it, more seriously, or, whatever you want to call it, it worked out for us that we were able to, we'd come home with some money, and the more we went out, the longer I could go without having to work necessarily. Obviously not the lap of luxury or anything like that, but I was paying my bills for the most part, or at least enough so that it felt like it was worth pursuing.
Yeah, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, it's like the decision making of whether to pursue it or not, that can be quite a daunting thing and potentially quite a scary thing. But then when you do it, when you commit yourself, you still have to have this 20% flexibility of, maybe it won't happen the way you want it to.
Yeah, I think so. You if you coming at it too serious out of the gate, um, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. I think. And also just it's kind of corny to just be too much of a pro dog about it, as we say.
Yeah, but surely there must be the danger of not taking it seriously enough. So by the time you realize maybe you actually should have taken the last few years seriously, that now it's too late.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a pitfall, and I think, and again, like I said with Phil and Dumps, especially like having a lot of different, they both had toured a lot and more so on the like, real serious DIY tip, and having a couple of people who had that experience, almost enough to potentially become jaded by it, but not quite there. And then you had, me at the time being relatively fresh to it.
Yeah.
So we had to sort of, you know, a lot of the bases covered as far as like perspective goes on that sort of thing. And also, again, we had a fairly hefty, network to kind of like Dumps always had these contacts, and it was, he was always kind of right on the ball as far as booking stuff went, and really right from the get go when he joined the band, he just kind of took over on that front. And Phil had the experience of going to Europe and doing kind of like a lot of the stuff that a lot of DIY bands don't get to do right away. So we had, I think, a pretty good perspective overall on like how like I should say, like a little bit of the looseness, a little bit of the ability to take it more seriously, whether we were ready to or not.
Not many people. I mean, you have to be pretty brave to start a punk rock band and just think you're gonna do real well right away. And I wonder, like, how did it feel when you started, and when people? I remember people picked up on Iron Chic really quickly. I remember getting that 2009 demo, 2009 or 10, just before I was, I bought got the plane tickets for Fest that year, and instantly it was an instant connection. And then seeing you at the Fest that year at the Bike Shack was incredible. Obviously you'd connected with so many people very quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I said, like our first real tour was down the Fest, and like the first fest we played wasn't that crazy, but it was probably the biggest show we had played as a band. I mean, the Kickstand, yeah, and it was I mean, it definitely was like the biggest show we had played, and I think after the show we sold a bunch of stuff, and we were definitely like kind of blown away by it. Like making our way down, we were like, oh, all right, we made enough for gas. Oh, we can go to the supermarket. We got an extra $20 or whatever. And it was definitely pretty tight. And I think that whatever we got for that show and then made in merch that night, like pretty much got us home, but we weren't really expecting to even be able to do that. So I think for me personally, like I skipped a lot of the real, not that I didn't, not that we didn't do like pretty bare bones DIY touring, but I skipped a lot of the really like, we have to like max out this credit card just to make it another 300 miles to get home or whatever, like that kind of thing. I sort of skated over that part, luckily. um, but yeah, I mean, it was still pretty cool. Even playing local shows, you maybe be lucky to get, a couple people to buy a T-shirt or something. So having a little bit of a line at the end of the set was like, was like pretty, pretty exciting.
And then Not Like This came along, and for me, that was just one of those albums I remember exactly where I was when I heard it for the first time. It sounds amazing. Phil did such a great job. I remember reading or hearing about that you recorded it from home, and just, all the bells and whistles around it, and the guitar tones, and the way it sounds is just so warm. It's like a giant hug, but it's also, it's raging as well. And it still holds up. What do you remember about that period of time? Just when that album was released.
We did another Fest tour right around the time the record came out, and then we did like our first like big, like I think it was 3 weeks or something, which was pretty hefty for us. And yeah, it seemed that tour went well, and like I think we came home with a little bit of money in our pocket on that one, and I think that really kind of showed us that we could continue to keep doing it, and it would sustain itself to some degree.
And having it released on Yo-Yo here in Europe meant that you were coming here
Yeah.
once or twice a year at points.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I mean, obviously this year things got a little crazy, but yeah, pretty much like if not every year, like every other year, we may have missed one or two here or there, but yeah, and that was Phil had known Jan for years with Latterman, so that was like a pretty established relationship there too. By the time I had been involved with it, so that was nice. I mean, we love going out with him. It's always like especially now. I mean, I've at this point I've known him 10 years, and uh, there's something very comforting about going there and just knowing that Jan's going to take care of us. He's going to drive. He's going to talk to the crazy foreign people for us, and just sort of deal with everything. And that was our first, well, weirdly enough, sort of like our first taste of any kind of luxury on tour was like not having to drive and having somebody have our schedule set for us, and telling us when we got to get up, when we got to be there, and a lot stricter than we would be for sure.
And what we touched on earlier about the difference between US and European touring, one of the things is maybe you can't afford a driver in the US for, I don't know, a 5-week tour, but that's plausible in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we can now, but yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get us to that point,
And having someone like Jan at Yo-Yo Records be able to speak the languages and drive must be such a help.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of, it's definitely an ease to the culture shock to have somebody be like, all right, you don't tip in this country, or don't do this when you get to this person's house, or whatever it is. Just that even if it's something kind of similar, you're not going to like necessarily stick your foot in your mouth or whatever, because Jan's he's been doing it so long and he's been everywhere.
When that first record, Not Like This, came out, did you feel like you had a responsibility to the people putting out the records and the promoters putting on the shows?
In what sense? I don't know if I necessarily feel like we felt like a responsibility to it. I think it happened pretty organically, where it was it aligned with what we wanted to do anyway. Like I said, I hadn't toured, so like every opportunity to tour in the beginning was pretty exciting for me, and in particular, so just having more people be interested, and knowing that the shows in this city and that city or whatever were like pretty much guaranteed to be good. It definitely made all that a lot easier to kind of take on. So I think it just happened to it just happened to align with what we wanted to do at the time anyway.
And so for you on a personal level, did the focus turn more onto touring and being in the band rather than working at home?
I think when we first started, like I said, I believe I was working at the pizzeria. I think I was coming kind of in and out. It's kind of it's honestly kind of hard to remember. Like it all sort of blurs together at a point. But I was, I know that I was definitely, struggling to a point, but it was to me worth it. Like I'd have to, kind of hustle to, make my rent or whatever, and not exactly know where it was coming from. Like not having a steady, paycheck in that sense, but the trade off of the freedom of it was enough to, make it worth the uncertainty for sure.
And is that still the case now?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, it's, for the most part, we know when we go out, we can, looking at the numbers beforehand is a little bit easier. It's like, there's often a guarantee now. Like we can kind of be sure that, we get like ticket counts and stuff, stuff that we never had in the beginning, where you can sort of gauge how things are going to go a little bit before they happen, so you can make an educated guess, kind of like, oh, if we go out for this long, we'll most likely make at least this much, and have some sense of what we'll come home with, and sort of be able to plan around that a little bit. I mean, obviously, this year has shown that you can't rely on anything, so uh, obviously, you could throw a monkey wrench into the works, and uh, but
Would for a portion of your year you'd be relying on touring and the band for paying your rent?
oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, probably more than anything else at this point. It got to the point where we were able to, you know, really make it almost a completely full time thing. Not entirely, but
I feel like a bit of
know.
a jerk asking you such blunt sort of financial questions, but
That's
I mean, I mean, I do find it fascinating. Someone once told me that, if you do something good, if you get to a certain level, you have to work twice as hard to stay there.
yeah. No, I mean, especially in music, it's like you're at the whim of what people are interested in. Like, somebody could lose interest in you just as quickly as they got into you, and having to, you know, even if it's in the back of your mind, sort of juggle the idea of like, what do people expect from us? What do people want to hear? What are people interested in at this time? And also balancing that with, how you want to write music and what you want to hear, or what you want to express, or whatever. And sort of reconciling the fact that, you know, that in some sense it's a commodity, and, you don't want it to become a thing where the money matters more than the creativity.
And that must be hard because, I mean, the mental stability must be tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and especially with the ever changing models of streaming, and like how you get paid, and it used to be that bands made all their money touring, and it's not even necessarily the way it is anymore. Like it's always shifting and changing, and you have to be pretty adaptable to stick with it, especially just with the way that technology advances, so fast now, that over the course of a year, all of a sudden, everybody's injecting music into themselves, or something. It's like something that you never even really thought of was possible is now the norm. So um,
And Mike Bruno, Dumps as you call him, has his label Dead Broke Records. And if you're listening to this and you haven't heard of that label, you should definitely go and have a look at that right now, and see all the great records they've got for sale there. But he must know, he must have good standing in, how people listen to and buy the kind of music that you're playing.
a lot of tasks fall on him, to the point of probably giving him undue stress, just because he always, like I said, with booking and stuff like that, he always just sort of fell into that role because it was something that he had already done. Like he had, like even now it'll be like, oh, we need to email the booking agent or whoever, and Dumps just does it because he spends all his day emailing bands anyway. So it's like, it kind of, I'm sure to his chagrin that it just it just sort of falls on him. And even now, having like having a booking agent, it's like uh Dump still ends up booking half, the shows himself or whatever. Or like if they can't find somebody in this city, Dumps is like, oh, I know somebody with you know, with a smaller venue than they would maybe, be looking at, or probably not a house show at this point, but something a little smaller or something.
So you can be pretty self-sufficient with, well, everything that you're doing.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, uh, we were planning on taking a year or so, probably calm down touring and work on a record, for the first time in a couple of years, where we weren't really planning to go out too heavy, and and then all the virus stuff happened, and we couldn't even be in the same building anymore. So that kind of made it harder. So this was really kind of the first time in a while that we were like, okay, like we're gonna, even though we sort of rely on the money that we make touring to make a conscious effort to, it forced some of us to, think about a little bit differently about how we make our money at this point. And I've just, I've spent the last 10 years of my life just avoiding having a real job. That's, you know, if I don't have to work, even if I'm poor, I'm more happy.
Have you started demoing stuff for that new record yet?
I don't know that we're quite at that point. We had gotten together a few times and started hacking out some ideas. I don't think we really have anything beyond, a collection of like verses and choruses and stuff like that.
What's your process there? How do you write?
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a like we generally will come to a band practice writing session or whatever, and generally Phil will have a couple of riffs in mind, and he'll sort of just start hacking out at them, and almost like a Back to the Future kind of like follow me for the changes sort of thing, and and just start playing along, and then he'll be like, oh, do this or that, or everybody will start throwing in their 2 cents as to how the pieces should go, and then generally by the end of that we'll have like a pretty rough semblance of a song, and then we kind of stack those up a bunch, and then I'll sort of sit with Phil and kind of go through the ones that the melodies stand out to me the most or whatever, and then we'll start kind of hacking out lyrics. And
yeah, I mean, your vocal melodies are just so strong. When those are one of the biggest things of the sound, I think, and that makes me wonder: does the melody tend to come before the lyrics for you?
Yeah, generally, I don't really usually sit and thank you, by the way, but I don't usually sit and write like lyrics out and then say, oh, what does this, what do these lyrics go to? It's usually more the opposite, and I'll sit and listen to the song, and once I start finding the melody that stands out to me, oftentimes we'll start with kind of just mumbly placeholder sounds or words or whatever, like maybe like one line will pop out in my kind of like thing, and then I'll sort of be like, all right, I can start from here, and then just sort of draw it out from from whatever the first couple of like sentences that pop out of whatever gibberish I'm kind of laying over it or whatever. With recording, like we'll say, oh, maybe we won't have Phil do it this time so he can focus on not having to record, or or just seeing how somebody else makes it sound. And we always just it's been so easy, like Phil has a studio in his basement. When we practice there, he can set mics up at the beginning of practice, and we just practice, and by the end everything we've done is on is recorded, and recorded in a way that he can EQ it and make this louder and that kind of stuff. And we'll practice and maybe come up with an idea or two, and that night Phil's emailing us the tracks, and I can sit and listen to it on my leisure, and kind of think about the songs. And then I'll go sit, we actually live together, so I can go down and be like, oh, you want to work on some lyrics, and we'll come up with an idea, and then we have I can just go, he'll set a mic up and record that, so it might not all be at the same time, but we can kind of hack out a demo pretty quick, overall, and then it makes it a little easier to sort of streamline the songs, like on on their own terms, kind of.
And you're a graphic designer, so I suppose that gives you so much flexibility to do that as well, to plug those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, like I said before, I pretty much just always, as a function of being the one who could do it, I've always, it's always sort of boiled down to me, to do whatever artwork we needed, and and I've always enjoyed doing it. And at some point, I was just like, well, I've done, my own bands, and probably a little bit of art for friends here and there. But at some point, I was just like, I should just, I'm already doing it for us. I should just see if other people want to do it, and started trying to, just get work. And was always the kind of thing that it was like I can only, I'll just take on whatever work I can when I'm home, and uh, even to some degree, like now I have an iPad that I can draw on, and at one point I had a laptop, and I don't think I ever actually did it, but it was always in my head that I could do this on the road too. Like after a show, I could draw or whatever. I never wanted, being on the road and actually doing that, it never really materialized. But theoretically, I could if I wanted to.
Clients is a bit of a dirty word, but are there any companies that you've been working with making illustrations for, and are there people that can just come at you with for commissions?
Yeah, for sure. I like doing pretty much anything that I feel I'm able to do. Every once in a while I'll get like a tattoo design, which to me is a little redundant to pay twice for, but luckily for me, sometimes people just want something, in my style, and so I'll do stuff like that. I just recently did a couple of jobs for a toy store, like a
Oh,
kind of
cool.
retro, action figure thing, and they do like a toy show, kind of like toy Comic Con or whatever you want to call it, a showcase thing, and I got to do some art for that, and that was fun because I do some like He-Man characters or whatever, stuff that's sort of up my alley. And I get a lot of weird little odds and ends here and there, and sometimes I'll get somebody who wants a gift for their partner, or
And your artwork is just so synonymous with the band.
yeah, I mean, we've always, I have my style, and it's always pretty much been, uh, you know, just kind of like, oh yeah, I can do it, so I'll do it, and you know, it just became the default aesthetic because that's how it just kind of shook out. And I definitely, it's cool to be able to have something like that, like have people, both on a musical and artistic level, have someone, look at something I've done and say, oh, like I know who that is, or or just to be able to appreciate it.
Yeah, and you've certainly got that.
I hesitate to use the word blessed, but I do, I do feel, to some extent, blessed by the universe to be able to, even if it's not, you know, uh, even if it's scary at times, just to be able to do this, and and it's definitely a privilege. I can't deny that. It's not something that everybody. It's not an opportunity that everyone is afforded. I'm definitely grateful for it.
Have you picked up any commissions over lockdown?
Yeah, I've actually been weirdly busy. I really didn't think I would be getting much, just with the fact that bands haven't been able to play, and stuff like that, and just people, just money being more of a concern in general for people. But I do think in some ways, people need their releases in times like this. So oddly enough, I've kept like fairly busy. Honestly, probably more busy in the last couple of months than I had been in the last couple of months before that.
And what's the name of your company, and how can people get in touch with you?
Righteous Indignation, I go by on that. Um, yeah, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff.
How do you find dealing with social media? Because anyone would understand how everyone hates it, but especially for a visual artist, it's vital.
Yeah. I mean, especially for something like visual art, you kind of have to be on Instagram. It's like where people find stuff like that for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's probably other art centric social media too, but nothing with the reach.
It beats Tumblr to the pip now.
Yeah. I still kind of don't really do Facebook. I think I think that's kind of past its prime as far as that stuff goes. And I try to have like somewhat of a Twitter presence, but I'm not really the type of person to just sort of blurt out my thoughts at the moment. I'm, more the type of person that spends 45 minutes like crafting, a tweet or whatever to make sure I don't have any misspellings and I don't sound stupid. But I have come to realize that people just say whatever dumb crap comes to their mind on Twitter, and maybe I should just do that. So, now every time I have a stupid, stoner thought, I'll try and like be like, oh, I'll put this on Twitter. People like that stuff.
Yeah, it's really like life version 2, isn't it? I'll have that thing all the time when I'll come back from seeing friends and I'll shut the door behind me in my living room and I'll just think, oh, fuck, I hope that, that thing that I said didn't alienate that person, or I hope that joke that I made, didn't go down completely the wrong way. And I'll spend ages worrying about that.
And now you can do that, for everyone to see.
Exactly. Lubrano, thank you so much for coming on here.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
So that was Jason Lubrano from Iron Chic on 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast. If you've been liking these podcasts, you can go and rate and subscribe wherever you're listening to them. And, well, just do that because that would be excellent.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent. Extreme close-up. Excellent. 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 They're excellent. Excellent. And excellent. 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 Hey, excellent show, everyone. Excellent. Dang. Incredible. Incredible.
You were incredible.
It was terrific. Amazing.
Unreal.
Wow. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Just to get to the point, this is so that you can go where you listen to your podcast and rate and subscribe. And if you rate it 5 stars, that would be...
It's great. Great. You'll be fine. Good. All right. Exactly. Swing. Cool. The shoots he scores. You guys kick ass. Okay. Game on. Good call.
Wow.
Yes. Not.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-eyed fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a business elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.